The UN first became a thing in 1945, just after the Second World War. The big Allied Four wanted to prevent another huge war from ever happening again, so they formed a new organisation designed to do just that.
We cannot forget the untold destruction that has been wrought, nor can we forget how close our whole civilization has come to utter ruin. It is our supreme responsibility at this conference and afterwards to see to it that this calamity never again falls upon the world.
United Nations for you, born in 1945. It is the most important international organization. Its main motto is to establish peace and progress. That's why it tries to prevent international conflicts and it facilitates cooperation among its member states. Its earlier form, League of Nations, was born after the First World War, but it could not prevent the Second World War, and that's why leaders felt it necessary to establish one more organization called United Nations. India joined the United Nations on 30th of October 1945. If we look at the principal organs of the UN, then there is United Nations Security Council, which has 15 members, out of which 5 are permanent and 10 are non-permanent. Permanent members are those which yield veto power, and non-permanent members are those who do not have veto power and are selected only for 2-year purpose. The decisions of the United Nations Security Council is binding on all the United Nations members. Second organ of the UN is General Assembly. General Assembly has representation of 193 members. Each member has 1 vote. Major decisions require 2/3 majority. The difference between United Nations Security Council and United Nations General Assembly is the decision of UNGA is not binding. Third organ is the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, which has 54 seats. Those are based on geography. It has functional commissions in the form of human rights, narcotic drugs, sustainable development, status of women. WTO is also a related organization. Then the fourth is ICJ, that is International Court of Justice, where 15 judges are elected for 9 years. It has its base in Hague. Absolute majority is required in both United Nations General Assembly and United Nations Security Council to elect a judge. Then the fifth organ is Secretariat. Sixth organ is the Trusteeship Council. When the United Nations was born, it has dealt with lot many issues. If we look back the 75 years of history, then the United Nations Security Council and United Nations General Assembly's attempts have borne fruits in the form of establishment of human rights doctrine, armistice agreement in Palestine, Korean settlement, Congo crisis dealing, return of democracies in countries called Namibia, non-proliferation treaty and the disarmament regime, United Nations Peace Forces receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988, hunger crisis and its dealings, climate change, notably the Paris Climate Agreement that happened under the aegis of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, gender equality. After all these, there have been the need for reforms, and it has been felt none other than even countries like India. Why the need? Because it has not been able to deal with issues in West Asia, issues in Ukraine, China's belligerence, Iran and Afghanistan, and the role of United States. Even why the need for reform is also because of the Western values that subjugates the Eastern values. When we look at the situation that was there when the United Nations was formed in 1945, and now there have been lot many changes that the world is seeing. Soviet Union has collapsed. US is still the strongest power, but other powers like China and India are also emerging. Economies of the West has stagnated or declined, while that of Asia have grown up. Many new countries have joined the United Nations. Other emerging new issues like civil war, ethnic conflicts, genocide, terrorism, epidemics, environmental degradation, and climate change are also bringing their new areas of concern. When we talk about the United Nations reforms, so the reforms are, there are two views, that number one, there should be reform of the organization's structure itself, and there should be review of the issues within the jurisdiction of the UN itself. When we talk about the United Nations reforms, then the biggest is United Nations Security Council reforms. There are many countries in the world who want that expansion of the United Nations Security Council should be the primary agenda, because those P5 member countries which has the veto power in the form of Russia, United States, China, France, and Britain no longer represent the entire humanity. So, what has been done to reform till now, in 1965, the non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council has been increased from 6 to 10. In 1992, United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution that says that United Nations no longer reflects contemporary political realities. United Nations Security Council also, the decision taken bears the Western value system image, and it also lacks from the equitable representation. Even new criteria have been proposed informally to include new members, and this is where countries like India have their better credentials. So when we talk about India and its case for the United Nations Security Council seats, so the major criteria or the credentials of the country include India being a major economic power, India being a major military power, India contributing to the United Nations peacekeeping force and has been contributing to it since a longer period of time. There are big nations called in the form of country like India, which are absolutely representing a greater level of population. 1/6 of population comes from the continent or Indian subcontinent. Then the nations that represent the democracy, and India is the largest democracy in the world. Then the countries like India can also make councils more representative in terms of geography, in terms of economic systems and culture. That's why India's case in the United Nations Security Council permanent membership is quite high. Recently, there were countries or world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly that called for urgent Security Council reform, and this is as latest as 21st of September 2023. Text-based negotiations in the United Nations has started since 2022. Few supported it in 2022, and others suggest that we should take little bit more time. Now we would be talking about what India is doing. India has been approaching the United Nations up to like 1993-94. In the initial 40 years of our independence, we did not think that United Nations General Assembly, Security Council seat is for ours. We were thinking that when the time will be right, we will get it. But since our economic boom after 1991 and constant irritations met in the form of Beijing opposing India's proposal to declare Masood Azhar kind of terrorist as a global terrorist, and increasing heft of India in the geopolitical arena has made India put its credentials in the form of its own United Nations Security Council permanent membership expansion. When we look about India's own membership that has been created in the form of G4, Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. This group was created in 2004 and it promotes the United Nations Security Council reforms, enlargement of both permanent and non-permanent categories, as well as supporting each other bids for permanent seats on the council is the main agenda of G4 grouping. But G4 grouping also gets criticism from Coffee Club. Coffee Club is another synonym for the consensus, Unity for Consensus group, that is of 12 countries. They propose expanding United Nations Security Council non-permanent membership from 10 to 20, but they did not talk about expansion of the permanent membership. There are countries in this Coffee Club who oppose the credentials of G4 countries. For example, Germany's candidature is opposed by Italy, India's by Pakistan, Japan's by North Korea, and Brazil's by Mexico. When we talk about what India stands to gain from the Security Council reforms, is number one, India's geopolitical heft can get a greater boost. Remember, whenever there is a talk about either Ukraine war or humanitarian crisis or any kind of assistance that has to be given in the form of peacekeeping, India wants itself to be a leader rather than a follower of United Nations Security Council's meeting. Those are only attended by 5 permanent and non-permanent members, 10 non-permanent members. So India wants its geopolitical heft to increase. Number two, when India gets a permanent seat, challenges like Jammu and Kashmir, challenges like in the northeast, and other human right violation allegations against India can be firmly dealt with by India. Third is, when India gets a United Nations Security Council permanent seat, then there will be countries either in the form of Britain, France, Russia, China, US, and other powers who would want India in their own set of calculus. They would want that India supporting them, so that's why they can get their proposals cleared. So India geopolitical heft can increase. India can raise voices on the new coming issues, either non-proliferation or in the form of peace and security, in the form of human rights violations, sovereignty and territorial integrity. So India has better and stands to gain from the United Nations Security Council. It is not only India which is supposed to get from the United Nations Security Council reform and permanent seat, it is also the United Nations itself, because the country represents the largest democracy. Country is the third largest economic power in the world on basis of purchasing power parity. India is itself a major military force. India always have followed United Nations mandates either regarding non-proliferation or peacekeeping or giving help to other countries, or United Nations sanctions, those are applied on member countries, are also followed by the country called India. Even the United Nations Security Council becomes more representative in terms of diversity, be it geographically, economically, or culturally. So we see that the United Nations Security Council seat and India's representation should happen. Thank you. For more such news or a particular informative videos, you can like the button and subscribe the channel. Thank you.